So this next section, I want to talk a little bit about some of the more intense experiences that autistic folks can experience that are can be very upsetting for them and for others around them too. These are burnout, meltdown, and shutdown, and they're all very similar. They have a lot of overlaps. I think they're different in maybe degrees of intensity. And then we'll talk a little bit about what they look like, and then also how a autistic person can recover from each of these. So just a quick overview, burnout is when you have extreme physical, mental, and sensory exhaustion after particularly prolonged periods of stress or unmet needs. And it may be a result of frequent meltdowns or shutdowns. Oftentimes meltdown and shutdowns will come as a result of being burnt out. One good rule of thumb of thinking about the difference between just feeling overwhelmed and stressed versus feeling burnt out is overwhelmed and stressed is usually an activating emotion. It's one that you feel with, right? You might feel really anxious. You might feel energized, angry. You might actually channel that to actually doing what you need to do to take care of that stressing you out, right? Once you reach the point of burnout, you're beyond that point. You actually are feeling numb. You're having a decrease in motivation and energy. You're feeling very empty and exhausted. A meltdown is an intense and involuntary feeling and response to an overwhelming or overstimulating situation. And this can lead to a shutdown too. A meltdown might cause somebody to do a lot of stimming behaviors where maybe they're rocking or pacing. They might be crying. They might be having more intense feelings bubbling up. And then a shutdown is just what it kind of sounds like. It's an overwhelming internal shutdown response to an overwhelming, stressful, and exhausting overstimulating situation. And again, this can also feed back into having meltdowns as well. But shutdown is when somebody is shut down. They're not talking, they're not responding as much. It can be scary for individuals who are encountering somebody who's in a shutdown mode because they might rightfully think something more serious, in terms of life-threatening medical event is happening. So what are some burnout signs? So one things we can look for is increased difficulty in self-care. When you start having memory issues, right, can't recall things quite as easily, other executive functioning struggles, feeling down or depressed more quickly, overstimulated, a decreased ability to mask, right, because you just don't have the bandwidth to do that as much, changes in sleep or irritability, less talking and maybe more withdrawal, and an increased need for time alone. So what do we do when we notice that we're starting to feel burnt out? How do we recover from this? Well, first and foremost, we rest more often. We really have to pick times to recharge and decompress, go to that sensory-free environment in our homes to be by ourselves and recharge. Engage in our special interests. And of course, the top thing I always tell my clients is now is the time to be kind to yourself, first and foremost. One of the filter questions I like to give clients when they're in a state of burnout is, for every decision you're going to make this week, I want you to ask a question first. If I do this, is it going to be an act of kindness to myself? And if it's not, then now is not the time to do it because we need to recover from the burnout. These individuals, it can help to spend time alone, to set boundaries, to spend time unmasking, to reduce some of your demands and activities if possible. I know that's not always possible. Again, to advocate for yourself and seek accommodations and ask for help. And of course, practice all the self-care that has worked for you in the past. Now's the time to be doing those things. And just maybe withdraw and socialize less often. That's okay if you need to recharge your social batteries. Okay, meltdowns, what are those signs? Well, like I mentioned earlier, it might be crying, it might be some self-injurious behaviors, meaning somebody might be hitting their head against the wall or hitting their hand against the wall, irritability, increased impatience, a difficulty communicating, maybe easily angered too, sudden desire to kind of just escape and get away and be alone, any increased anxiety, feeling emotionally overwhelmed, and any type of sudden change in behaviors or any unusual behaviors that pop up could all be signs of a meltdown happening. The causes are very similar to burnout, sensory overload. A big thing that can cause meltdowns to happen is change in plans and routines. Autistic folks are very routinized. They depend on their routines, like I mentioned earlier, to really help the world feels more predictable, to feel more safe in it. So any major change can be helpful, really, or you should say stressful. I've had clients in the past who, when they have to move, or each semester a change of new professors and new classes, that can be really overwhelming because now it's a whole new routine that needs to be established. Other things that can cause meltdown are having unmet needs or too unrealistic needs, but being unable to express your needs. A fear of failure and a fear of rejection, those are very common among autistic individuals because they've often experienced a lot of rejection in their lives. They might not be in tune with their bodily functions, like they might not notice that they haven't eaten in a couple days or that they're thirsty. Obviously, an anxiety component of meltdowns is very much at play here. Exhaustion from masking is another cause. Being overstimulated, so being in crowded spaces that are too noisy, too chaotic, too unstructured can cause them. Too much socialization, and then loud noises. Autistic folks often have a very intense startle response, so it doesn't take much, and a loud unexpected noise can set off a meltdown or even a shutdown in a more intense situation. So what are some strategies for what we do when meltdowns are happening? Well, while they're happening, it's important to find a quiet space. Use all the tools that help you, like noise-canceling headphones, weighted blankets, stim as much as you need to do. Maybe sit and stay low, close to the ground, or lay on the ground. Research has shown that actual laying on the ground, literal grounding, does seem to help. After you're coming out of the meltdown, making sure you're drinking water, you're eating. Try to work with your therapist or somebody who's with you to try and identify what the triggers were. Again, top priority item is be kind to yourself. A lot of autistic folks will beat themselves up and feel guilty for doing this when it's not something that's fully in their control. So it's not fair to blame themselves, but they will do that. So being kind to yourself is really important. Making sure that as they're coming out of this that they engage in their special interests, watch their comfort shows, read their comfort books, be around their pets if that helps, and just doing the things of self-care that they need to do. Just like if they were recovering from the flu or COVID, you wouldn't just expect to jump right back in, hitting the ground running. You have to work your way up to that and ease your way back in. Okay. Autistic shutdowns, what are the signs of these? So this is probably the most intense because this is when somebody it really is what it just sounds like, right? When somebody is completely shut down. So they might have extreme tiredness or exhaustion. They might be not speaking or totally silent at all. A lot of my clients who have this happen, they might have to use their phone to communicate. What I recommend for autistic folks to do who have shutdowns is to have a pre-written thing on your notepad on your phone that you can show an individual so they know what's happening, so they don't get really worried and call an ambulance for something that an ambulance might not be needed for. You can have a pre-written script saying, hey, I'm autistic, this is what happens sometimes when I feel overstimulated, these are the things I need right now, and that will help clear things up. It might look like somebody staring blankly, that 1,000-yard stare. They feel like they're not even in the room with you. A numbness of all emotions, right? The person might be completely feeling numb. There might be not any affectation or outward showing emotion. They withdraw both socially and emotionally. They might stay very still, and again, that can be concerning if somebody doesn't know what a shutdown looks like. And of course, a sudden lack of any interest in pleasures or activities. And hopefully shutdowns are usually not very long lasting because they can be very obviously upsetting and draining for the individual experiencing them. What causes them? A lot of the same things for the others, for the meltdowns and the burnout, but too much sensory experiences, sensory overload can cause them, too much stress. Any significant changes, plan, routine, any significant rejections can cause that as well. Exhaustion from masking or unmet needs. Feeling unable to meet other people's expectations can be a cause of this. Intense or high emotions and overthinking, overanalyzing, too many demands, too many unexpected and expected demands. And then, like I mentioned earlier, rejection sensitive dysphoria is a big part of this, where somebody really feels like maybe they're being rejected and they get in their head about that. And again, any sudden loud noises that can startle somebody can also cause a shutdown as well. Okay, so what are the strategies for if you have a student that's in a shutdown? Well, during it, again, find a quiet space where they can decompress, make sure they're giving themselves some time to recover. We want to reduce the sensory input as much as possible to try and make it really understimulating so that they're not feeling overstimulated anymore. Again, all the tools that the person might find helpful, whether they use noise-canceling headphones, weighted blankets, sitting on the ground, like I talked about earlier. And then after they come out of this, again, being kind to themselves, not judging themselves. It's also often a very embarrassing feeling, although no autistic person should ever feel embarrassed by having a shutdown. I get why they do. I think most people would. They have no reason to feel embarrassed, but they often beat themselves up afterwards. So reminding them that they did nothing wrong, they weren't in control of this, and to be kind to themselves. Make sure they're getting lots of sleep, make sure they're eating and drinking, engaging in their special interests. And again, I'll say it one last time, but it's so important just to remember it's not their fault.